Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is No Game, No Life, Episode 8, Fake End. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of exactly what happened within this episode. So this episode begins with Sora, Shiro, Jabril and Stephanie arriving at the Eastern Federation's embassy near Elkia, and Stephanie is panicking because they didn't call ahead. However, Sora then reveals that he had made an appointment that morning, and basically it is revealed once they enter the embassy that it was a bluff, as he had used his phone to zoom in, notices that one of the werebeasts is watching them, and essentially he then signaled that he was coming. But as the werebeasts were pretending to be able to read minds, the old man just kind of had to go along with it. And they then are led to a meeting room. And as they are being led to the meeting room, they realize that the technology is very advanced in the Eastern Federation. And at the meeting, they meet Izuna, who is the old man's granddaughter and is the representative for the Eastern continent. And that is when Sora and Shiro reveal that they would like to challenge the werebeasts. They go over the history of the game, how they have deduced that what the game is, why the elves challenged 4 times, what the Eastern Federation's goal in gaining territory on the continent was, essentially because their technology was so advanced, their island didn't have enough resources, so they ventured into the continent. Elvengard, because it was so large, had the capacity to lose a few times, but they deduced that first time they lost, second time and third times they tried to deduce what the game was based on having lost. Fourth time, even after deducing what the game was and how they had lost, they still couldn't win, and so that is why they stopped. And then they present their challenge, which is, of course, humanity's race peace in exchange for the werebeasts. Basically, if they lose, okay. If the werebeasts win, they get the race peace of humanity, which would basically remove all of humanity's rights as one of the Exceed races. And of course, that would then imply humanity's remaining territory would also be theirs. And they get to erase the memories of the game from Sora and Shiro, who reveal the Old King's tricks. We then have, if they win, like if Sora and Shiro win, then they get all of the werebeast territory that is on the continent in exchange for that. And this, of course, leads to the challenge being given, but they can't make a decision on their own because it is a lot of territory, and obviously they are just the embassy, not the representative of the race. Therefore, they ask for time. Sora and Shiro then go back. There are protests on the streets because when the race peace was wagered, all of humanity had the piece start glowing on their chest, which basically notified everyone. We also see that Kurumi and Fiel are able to see the glowing piece on her chest, and she gets angry. We then find amid the protests that Sora and Shiro are acting very casual and are waiting for someone. And then at the end of the episode, we have Sora seemingly speaking to the air and saying that he trusts Shiro as things sort of glitch out and go from color to black and white. And then it ends on the line of Sora saying, "Let the game begin," and cuts off. Now we've been reminded about what happened within the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we're ranking on 2 lists, the mostly objective ranking, which is based on set values, and then the personal ranking, which is based on my opinion. So for this episode, we didn't have any negatives on our mostly objective rank values. However, there were a couple of positives. So the first positive is worth 2 points, and that is the introduction of Hatsuse Ino, who is the grandfather, the older werebeast man. And then we had the second 2 points, bringing us to a total of 4 for the introduction of Hatsuse Izuna, who is the embassy ambassador for the werebeasts and is Ino's granddaughter. And then we get our pieces of world building, which are worth also 4 points, and that is the existence of video games in the world and also what happens when a race piece is wagered. And that, of course, is that the race piece glows on the race's chests and like basically over their hearts. And if and when they lose that game, that would essentially erase all of that race's rights to being an exceed, and the commandments would no longer apply to them, meaning that violence could be enacted upon them, and that they would be considered as no better than any other animal in existence, which really raises the stakes on that game. And that brings this episode to a mostly objective rank of 8 out of 10. Which brings us to our series rankings so far in our mostly objective ranking. And in first place, we have Beginner, Grandmaster, Challenger, Interesting. This episode, Fake End, comes in 5th. Then Expert in 6th, Sacrifice, and in last place so far, Weak Square. So now we come to my personal ranking for this episode. And much like the last episode, it is really setting up to the game, but I feel like there's more progression in this plot, so I liked it a bit better than the previous episode. However, I did find on an initial watch, the exposition and explanations that Sora and Shiro give throughout the episode would have been needed. However, when you're rewatching, it's it feels excessive because you already know this information because you've watched it before. So then it feels like most of the episode is just dragging on because they're repeating information that you already know. Though, like I said, if it's your first time watching it, this information is necessary and important to the plot and a needed explanation. So that is why it did not count as a negative on the objective list. But this is my personal opinion, and this is a rewatch, and I did find it to be a bit boring because I already knew what was going to happen. And then, of course, there was the clever use of the cell phone. I liked that to basically call the bluff and confirm that werebeasts actually cannot read minds, but what they can do is because of their increased senses, they can know if someone's lying based on like their heart rate and other biochemical cues that they may give off, and that is basically how they can determine that in combination with like cold reading, their facial expressions, which again they can see very well because of their increased vision, to basically make it look like they can read minds. I also found it interesting how they kind of had a combination of like historical Japanese like architecture with all of the modern technologies like the elevators and the large display screens, so it's kind of blending modern and historical. I thought that was very good for the aesthetic. And then at the cliffhanger, he starts glitching out. No explanation is really given, and that does then lead you to want to watch the next episode to find out what exactly is happening because it is a bit confusing. However, Do you like to be confused? And when this was originally airing, do you want to wait a week to not be confused anymore? Personally, no. But it would work because I would definitely tune in because I would be confused and want to have answers by the next week. Anyways, I liked the episode. I felt that the things in it were necessary to the episode, but I wasn't overly entertained on this episode either. I felt like the explanations ran most of the episode, and once you've heard it once, you don't really need it a second time, so on a rewatch, this episode really could be skipped just for that reason. And so I decided to give it a 6 out of 10 because I acknowledge the necessity, but just, again, wasn't entertained. And that brings our series ranking so far in the personal ranking to in first place, interesting, second, grandmaster, beginner, expert. This episode came in fifth, fake end, sacrifice in sixth, challenger, and then weak square in eighth. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked No Game No Life, episode 8, Fake End. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.